All right, so we are jumping in back here in our lovely study guide. We spent some time yesterday talking about blood, the blood. Two main pieces. What are they? The plasma and the something. But this is part of that something that's in the second. The formed elements, right? Oh, yeah. And the formed elements were made up of platelets. That was about 7%. Then what? Water. Not water, that's plasma. Red blood cells, right? And white blood cells. Good. Red blood cells being what carry the oxygen. White blood cells attack the invaders, bacteria, infections, these kind of things, right? The platelets are clotting, right? They're incomplete cells clotting. Plasma has the water, which is most of it. Proteins, gases, electrolytes, wastes, nutrients. So there you go. In 2 minutes, that was yesterday's conversation. Then we looked at this diagram here, looking at the circulation of the blood, right? And if you looked at your study guide, that's one of the pieces I want to make sure you understand. A question is simply going to be, just as it's worded there. If you start in the right atrium, if you are a blood droplet or a cell, you can be a white blood cell or a red blood cell, whatever you want to be, trace your journey through this circulatory system. And so that's what I want to spend some time doing with you today, is going through that journey, the circulatory system. Or should we talk about Higgs bosons? That's what we're talking about in physics today. No? Circulatory system. All right. So we're beginning in that right atrium. Okay, remember that the heart has it's divided, right? This is my left side, this is my right side. I've got the atrium and I've got the ventricles, right? We're starting in that right atrium. I'm not sure why my A's weren't completed. So we're starting here. And we're going to pass through the tricuspid valve. What does tri mean? 3. So if you were to look at that valve, and here's a picture of the valves of the heart, the tricuspid valve looks like this. This is, again, a section that's gone through the heart here. Okay, so it's going from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve into what? What's below that tricuspid valve? The ventricle, the right ventricle. Okay, so we've moved from here through the tricuspid into the ventricle. Remember that there's that two-part contraction. Lub-dub, right? That first lub is the atrium contracting, pushing the blood down into the ventricle through that tricuspid valve. Then you get the dub, the lub-dub. The dub, the big contraction, is pushing from the ventricle out. So from that right ventricle, where does it go? Follow the journey with me, my friends. Into this pulmonary artery, right? You're following along. What page is this on again? 346, thank you. Through that pulmonary, or into the pulmonary artery. Whoops. So right ventricle, the pulmonary artery, and that has to go through the pulmonary valve in order to do that. You see what I'm speaking of, right? This little three-part valve. Now, what do these valves do? They do open and close, good. What's the point of them? Okay, and not let it go back the other direction, right? Because when this heart squeezes, can you see that these valves open inward? Right? Can you see that they have openings going downward into the ventricle. So therefore, when that ventricle squeezes, if the blood pushes up against that, it shuts the valve, right? But it will allow blood to flow from the atrium down into the ventricle. You with me, friends? Sir? Because this is where the blood, because the heart rests, right? Lub-dub, rest, lub-dub, rest, lub-dub, rest. In that rest time, those atrium are filling with blood. And so there's this, it's basically a collecting spot to then get pushed down to the ventricle, to then to get pushed other places. So yeah, it's basically just it's a holding spot, the atrium is. So through into the pulmonary arteries, and where are they going from the pulmonary arteries? What's it going to? The lungs. And why do they go to the lungs? What's the whole point of going to the lungs? Get oxygenated, right? So it gets oxygenated. And now I'm going to switch colors because blue blood, they're usually talking about deoxygenated blood. Red blood is blood that has oxygen in it. Yes, ma'am? We will. Not this chapter, but we will, absolutely. The little things are called the alveoli, little sacs in the lungs that make that transfer. Carbon dioxide goes out, oxygen comes in. So it gets O2, and we can put here too, releases CO2. Okay, from the lungs, where's it going next? So we've gotten through this process here, CO2 out, O2 in, through the alveolar capillaries. It's going to go back to the heart, but what vessels does it use to do that?
The pulmonary veins.
Pulmonary veins, right? That's these red ones here. Yep, pulmonary veins. Now there might be something that kind of strikes you as kind of strange here. Arteries normally carry blood that is oxygenated, right? And veins carry blood that is not oxygenated. That's normally the way it works, right? The blood vessels going to the lungs are the only ones that are like this. The only arteries, because artery means going away from the heart. Vein means going towards the heart. Okay? So therefore, going from the heart, if you're coming out of that right ventricle, is the pulmonary artery, but it has blood with no oxygen, right? Because it's going to the lungs to get oxygen, right? Gets oxygen, gets sent back to the heart through the pulmonary veins, but now it's oxygenated, okay? It's the only time that that's the case. Pulmonary veins, it then goes into what part of the heart? The left, not ventricle, atrium. Okay, the left atrium. When that first lub-dub, right? Lub-dub, the lub pushes it from that left atrium through the what? We're over here now. The mitral valve. Okay, have you heard of mitral valve prolapse? Anybody heard anything like that? It just means that valve is not totally closing all the way. My wife has that a little bit. It can cause problems. It can even be life-threatening at its worst stage. She doesn't have it anywhere close to that. But for her, mainly, it's more susceptible to infection. So when she had dental procedures, she had to take antibiotics beforehand. I think so, yes. As far as I know, but it's a good question. I don't know for sure. Through the mitral valve, gets into the left ventricle. And again, this is all blood that is oxygenated. Where is it going from there? Well, okay, but what vessel does it go through? Because we're right here. It's going to go to the aorta. And it will go through the aortic valve. And again, the point of those valves is simply to keep the blood from flowing backwards. Because it's under pressure, right? These things are squeezing and pushing it out. And it's to keep it from flowing backwards. So through the aortic valve, that will get to the arteries, or the arterioles, those are the smaller ones. And then it gets to the capillaries. You with me where we are here now? We're either the top or the bottom, because that aorta splits. Part of it goes up, part of it goes down. And there's tons more blood vessels. You're not having to learn all the blood vessels that are involved in this, thankfully. There's a whole bunch of them. But it goes into the capillaries. What happens then in the capillaries?
Isn't that what goes to the body?
It is, right? These are all through the body, and it delivers what? The oxygen to the cells, right? So oxygen goes to the cells. What do the cells put back in the bloodstream? The carbon dioxide. You with me? So the capillaries is where we get O2 in, CO2 out. And then from the capillaries, where do they go next? The veins, right? The veins and the venules, those are the little veins. So venules are the smaller ones, then to the veins, then to, what's our last step before we get back to the right atrium? Right. The inferior and the superior vena cava. And then back to the right atrium. And you start the process all over again. Okay? So blood, yes ma'am. Yeah, let me show you. So here is kind of your outside picture of what the heart looks like. Well, let's use this one even. So here's the outward view. Lungs here, right? The heart's in the middle, diaphragm is underneath it, right? So this big arch here is the aorta, and the vena cava is here on the other side. If we open it up, well, this is the, so if I open it up here, you can see right atrium, that's where the vena cava dumps into it, right? Both the superior and the inferior dump into that spot. So it's not like they're tubes that run through the heart. The heart itself is just this atriums. The left, the right atrium, left, right ventricle. And then from the left ventricle is where you get that aorta, where it sends that blood flow up through there. You can't see it great there. I'm trying to find you a better picture here. These are outside pictures, but like here's the start of that. This is the posterior view. So it's more like it's connected to that right. It's basically the exit out of the left ventricle. And the input going into the right atrium is that vena cava. And they're big. I mean, these are big, thick. Remember on your cats, right? The cat's heart was what? Like this big. It wasn't very big at all. But those are pretty thick veins, pretty thick arteries that were those pieces. Yeah, right, exactly. Ours are 3-4 times that big. You got it. Okay? Any questions here? Any questions with that circulation journey? Because that's what I'm looking for. On your test, I will ask you that piece. Okay? Shh. Can you see, my friends, that the heart has its own blood supply? These cardiac veins and cardiac arteries, coronary arteries. Here's the front side, here's the back side. See these big, huge veins? The coronary sinus, that's a big vein. The middle cardiac vein, these coronary arteries. Are you comfortable that heart muscle's working awfully hard? Right? I mean, it pauses. Every beat it takes, there's a little bit of rest, but It doesn't get to sleep. It doesn't turn off. If it turns off, you die, right? So that's why cardiac muscle is this special kind of muscle that's made to have that endurance, made to continually fire every moment from a couple of weeks after you were conceived until you die, with hopefully no breaks in between, right? So those, if you were to look at the inside of this heart, well, not that one. Oy. Right after, so this is showing you, this is the aortic valve, right? So coming from that left ventricle, going out to the rest of the body, right? Immediately after that valve is this opening of the left and the right coronary arteries. So the heart is taking blood immediately to feed itself. The oxygen, the nutrients, all the things it needs to work. If you have a heart attack, you have got some clogging in one of those arteries, or sometimes multiple of those arteries. You've heard about them talking about bypass? That's what they're doing. They have to literally go around this blockage or open it up. A heart catheterization is where they go in and they open up these arteries right around the heart to help keep that blood flowing to the heart. Because if that heart muscle doesn't get blood, it causes pain, it starts to die. What do we call that? A heart attack. That's what a heart attack is. That muscle's, the blood supply to that muscle is being blocked, and it starts to die. It can be fat buildups. That's usually what causes it. Cholesterol, right? That's the technical name for that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's this buildup. So instead of the blood vessel being this wide, it starts to narrow and get smaller and smaller and smaller. Increases the blood pressure because you're trying to push volume to this smaller tube, so the pressure goes up. Causes some difficulties. Yeah. Number one leading cause, by the way, of men and women in the United States, heart disease. Heart disease. Why? Because we eat a lot and we don't exercise enough. That's what it boils down to. Yes? Eggs and beans. What in those things would be causing that? I've not ever heard of that, to be honest. I do know a large amount of fat, but fat in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all, frankly. It's just a matter of too much.
But there's nothing that would cause an internal blockage. It's all fats.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Other questions here? Okay. Yes?
High cholesterol is genetic.
There can be a genetic piece to it, but I think the vast majority of folk, it can be controlled. Even if you may be genetically, if you have family members who have the same difficulty, you can still control it, usually with diet and exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about it makes it genetic? Because it seems to be very circumstantial.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe just that the size of the blood vessels is different. Maybe the body is just prone to produce and not absorb these fats more. I truthfully don't know. I can throw guesses at you, but I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. All right, the next piece to talk about with this heart is what's cool about the heart is it controls itself. Now, the brain can do some controlling of the heart to make it beat, but for the most part, it takes care of itself. It has this little bundle of fibers here called the SA node, the sinoatrial node. And that produces the depolarization, the signal, right? Remember when we talked about nervous system? It produces the signal that gets sent down these nerve fibers in the heart to cause part of it to beat. And it does not need the brain to tell it to beat. Whereas most everything else in our bodies need the brain to tell it to work, right? These guys, it takes care of itself. So here's that sequence. And this is one thing that in the past we have learned, but we're not doing it this time. Where you're rolling through this process from the SA node. So that's here, right? into the atrial, I can never pronounce this word, syncytium? Syncytium, I'm pretty sure. And that's basically meaning through the atrium. So the signal goes from that SA node to the atrium. What does that make the atrium do? Contract, right? It then goes from that SA node, from the atrium, to the AV node, the atrioventricular node. Which again, that's this piece that's right here, the AV node. So it starts in one place, it splits off, goes into the atrium, comes back together through those junctional fibers into the AV bundle. It kind of gets the signals strengthened again, and it sends it out through those AV bundle branches, and then it splits, right? Goes down the center of the ventricles and comes around, wraps around into these bundle branches and the Purkinje fibers. Syncytium? There we go. I was close, right? That's what I said, wasn't it? Or Scythium, I said. Okay, good. Moving into the Purkinje fibers, into the ventricles. Can anybody answer this question? Why does it take such a long journey? Here is the SA node, right into the ventricles, right? But then it goes through this whole big, huge process, down, around, before it finally gets to the ventricle pieces to have them fire. Why? What do you think? Definitely. Definitely. Okay, but remember, this isn't carrying oxygen. This is carrying this electrical signal telling this guy to fire. Stay with me, guys. Stay with me. They do. Nerves, they conduct things pretty quick or pretty slow? Pretty quick, for the most part, right? Are you comfortable this is not that far of a distance from the atrium to the ventricles? Yeah. So if there wasn't this longer journey, it would be like, boom, boom, boom. Like it would happen super quick. But there's actually a bit of a pause between the atrials lubbing and the ventricles dubbing. And you all are enjoying my lub dubbing, I see. Right? So there needs to be this little bit of time between them. And that's why it takes this longer journey to get around. The atrium, yeah. And longer to the ventricles. Because these guys contract first and these guys second. With a bit of a pause in between. The AV node is after the atrium's already contracted. And the AV node is basically sending the signal on to the ventricles. It kind of, both of those nodes can produce the signal to fire. So it's like the SA node is telling the AV node, okay, yes, fire now, after the signal has gone through the atrium.
Where does the signal end up? Does it end up in a specific place?
The end of it is basically just these Purkinje fibers and in the actual fibers of the ventricle. So no, just kind of that's like the end of the line. The signal stops. A new one comes down, and it beats again.
And the fibers like the wall of
Yes. Because it's attached to the muscles. All the wall of the heart is just muscle. All that cardiac muscle. Question? I just stretch. Okay. Any questions here? You don't have to know this pattern, but I do want you to understand the fact that there is this series of signals that are sent by the heart itself, not the brain. The brain does not control this consistently. The vagus nerve does go to the heart, can control it. But most of the time, the heart is beating on its own with these guys. One of the interesting new areas of research with the heart, it's quite interesting. There's some very, very interesting stuff out there. Are you comfortable these are nerve cells, right, that are carrying this signal? What they've come to find out is that your heart actually has a bit of a brain. Like it actually has a bit of memory in it. There are truthfully cases where somebody has had a heart transplant and they will know things about the other person. that like nobody else knew. Locker combinations. A young man who received the heart of a young lady and suddenly found himself wanting to dance. Like this was something he really wanted to do. And come to find out that she was a dancer. Right? I just have to dance. Right? My hands, they're going. Right? But no, that there is memory. And I always thought that was interesting because, the Bible talks about your heart like being the center, right? Like being the seat. And that's, I always thought that was so old. Oh, no, it's the brain, right? It's not the heart, it's the brain. But no. There is some of these deep-seated memories and deep-seated emotions that come from the heart, not from the brain. Kind of strange, but true. Have you seen something like this before? Yeah. If you watch any television stuff? Yeah. An EKG or an ECG, depending on what country you're from.
Where's the ECG?
Electrocardiogram. EKG is German.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what are we calling it?
We do, right, yes. That's just, it is what it is. It is what it is. There's 3 different waves. And this is, again, not something you have to know for your test, but I think it's good information for you to be comfortable with. 3 different waves. The P wave, QRS complex, and the T wave. And what this is looking at the electrical signals in the heart itself. You use electrodes on the skin, various different places, and you can pick up this electricity coming from the heart. We can see it, right? Please stay with me, guys, all right? I appreciate it. The P wave, remember that nerves, how they fire is depolarization, then repolarization, right? I depolarize to send the signal down, and then I repolarize to get back to ready to fire again, right? So the P wave, this is the depolarization of the atrium. This is really bothering me, that it won't give me the thing that I want. I want the eraser. So this is the depolarization of the atrium. What the QRS complex is the depolarization of the ventricles. And what the T wave is the repolarization of the ventricles. What's missing? The repolarization of the atrium. That happens during that QRS complex. But because that ventricle contracts so much harder and takes much more electricity to send the signal to this big ventricle, it gets blocked out. And what they do, whenever you have any sort of heart issues, or almost truthfully, anytime you go into the hospital, they will put you on one of these guys if they suspect some sort of heart condition. Why? Because this tells them if the heart's working right. There are truthfully whole classes, if some of you are going to be nurses or doctors, you will take full classes on how to read these EKGs. And different waves, different sizes, different directions mean different things. It can mean that the atrium aren't working right. It can mean the ventricles aren't working right. It can mean that this part is just kind of quivering and not firing in this nice rhythmic pattern. You get tons of information if you know how to read these EKGs from just a very simple, non-invasive kind of test. But we won't test you on that in this class. All right? Questions there? We're just kind of rolling along here. You guys are quiet. Well, most of you are quiet. Let's look at a vein versus an artery. These are cross sections of the two. Artery on the left, vein on the right. Tell me what you see. What do you see as far as differences between these things? Give me a raised hand. What do you think, Nick?
Veins more hollow, but the walls are thinner, and the arteries got thicker walls, but the tubes are narrow.
Definitely. Cool. He stole yours, right? Yeah. Stole it away from you. There's a valve in the which one? In the veins. Absolutely. Veins have valve. You've seen varicose veins on people? Oftentimes what's causing that is there's been some problems with the valves in those veins, and so the blood is pooling. Like that, like if you look at someone's legs in particular, and you have just like these bulging kind of veins, like the blue, they're not very pretty most of the time. It's from pooling. It's pooling of this blood, and it's not moving back up to the heart as.
Why do your veins have that?
That's just increased blood pressure, for the most part. Yeah, but this is a different something.
Is that hereditary?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. Can you see this tunica media is thicker in the artery than it is in the vein? These arteries actually have muscle that goes around them and actually helps them to contract or dilate. Why would you want these arteries to contract or get smaller? Like the arteries, say, in your hands or in your arms or in your legs.
Like
If you're cold, why would that be good?
then you reduce the blood flow to your extremities.
Okay, to preserve the heart, the important stuff, right? If you're really cold, the body starts pulling that blood from those areas and keeping it in the things that are important. Because you won't die if you lose a finger, right? But if your brain gets too cold, you will die, right? If your heart gets too cold, you will die.
Is that why you turn?
Sure, right. Yeah, absolutely. You get real pale, right? Yeah.
Exercising when you're really cold isn't a good idea then?
No, it
Because
is.
puts the blood back into your arms.
Well, you're producing heat. Remember that the muscles, when they're contracting, they produce heat. That's why when you're really cold, what do?
Shiver.
You shiver. It's these involuntary contractions trying to produce heat.
But doesn't that pull some of the blood away from your main organs?
Theoretically, yes, it would do that, but it's more you're producing more heat. So I think that outweighs that loss of the blood that way. Okay, I'm going to stop this guy here. Keep going for a couple of minutes here, but.